Hi, my name is Sofia Morales and I'm at the Conservation Workshop at the Universidad Francisco Marroquín at the Ludwig von Mises Library. With me today is Evan Knight. He's a conservation technician of the Benson Latin American Collection at the University of Texas at Austin. This is the first of 6 book reparation videos. Today he will show me the parts of the book.
Thank you, Sophia. We'll start with naming the outside of the book. This is going to be called the head. This is going to be called the tail. And there's really 2 parts. There's the text block, which is really just the text and the paper.
Okay.
And then you have the cover, and they're put together somewhat separately. On the text block, it's sewn together, and then there's glue pasted on the outsides of it, of the spine. This here is called an end band, and this one is hand sewn, but you could also just stick them on. Okay. And then you put different linings above it of different types of paper, as well as this lining called cambric, which is a textile. And this helps form the case to the text attachment, so it helps put the book together with its case. This is also called, this is an end paper, the last few leaves, and also the first few leaves of a book are called the end paper. The one that gets pasted down is also called the paste down. Okay. For the cover, it's usually made of binder's board and covered with a cloth. And that's a pretty good introduction to some book repair vocab.
This is all very interesting. Thank you, Evan. But why are you using such a small book?
Well, this is a model I made to help explain how the book is made. There's many different parts that when the book is completely covered that you don't know about and that are hard to see and that are not intuitive. So making a cutaway like this in a small size can be really helpful.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm here with Marisol Zuniga of the Preservation Laboratory at the Ludwig von Mises Library at the University of Francisco Marroquín, and we'll be presenting the tools and equipment and materials that will be common and useful in your bookbinding shop. First is the Bonefolder. This is probably your most useful tool. You use it to fold materials, such as Marisol is doing with cloth. You'll do it for paper, you'll do it for cardstock, many things. You can also use it, you will also use it to smooth out air bubbles and air pockets and to get an even layer of adhesive when you use any glue or paste or anything else, and you'll smooth it out like that. You can also use different types of bone folders for different types of jobs. We have some examples of different sizes, and we also have a bone folder of Teflon, which is very useful because it won't burnish your paper or your cloth, and a bone folder made of bone will. So having a range of sizes is important for your lab. I'm here with Wendy Costencia of the Preservation Lab, and today we'll be introducing the paper knife or bookbinder's knife. It's your most useful utility knife to have on hand. It can be used for a number of things, including cutting paper, such as newsprint, as well as cloth and any other type of things. And if you have a sharp knife, you can use a straight edge and use it as a scalpel or other knife. Another tip is to have it on hand in case you get any adhesive on your book or in unwanted places. You can easily pick it off with the knife. I'm with Dolores Diaz, and we are going to introduce scissors. They're absolutely necessary in your shop, and there's 2 sizes that I use. One is a relatively large one for cutting oversized materials, getting large pieces of cloth, paper, anything like that. And also we have small size scissors for cutting smaller things such as corners, also for cleaning up bits of stray cloth that may overhang on anything you're making. They'll give you a higher degree of accuracy. We will be introducing bookbinders awls. They're very useful when you're going to be sewing any sections together or making end papers, because you'll need to poke holes into the ends of the sections, which we're going to demonstrate. Having a sharp awl is really good because you'll get clean cuts with a lot of control and very sharp also. So if you'll be doing any regarding or sewing sections, you should get an awl. Having a number of different sized rulers is going to be important also. We have a couple here on hand. The first one actually isn't a ruler, but a metal edge to guide your cutting. The rulers that we have are good, different sized. One for small size material, another for medium, and finally for oversized, which an oversized ruler will help very much for cutting large material. A note, though, is I have 2 points. The first is to have a ruler that whose measurements come straight to the edge of your ruler. If you have small, minute measurements to make, this will make your life easier. And second, a lot of times rulers come with cork or rubber on the back of it. You'd want to get that off because you want your ruler to be completely flush with what you're going to cut. You want no space in between where your knife could wiggle. And finally, what we have is a tape measure, which is going to be very useful when you have to take measurements of oversized or oddly shaped material, and I highly recommend it. If you're going to be having to transport a lot of measurements, it's a good idea to get familiar with spring dividers. There's different sizes, and you can see in the demonstration how you can transport the size, the measurement of one particular object exactly multiple times. So if you have certain measurements, for example, the thickness of a book, if you're going to be making a box that you need to repeat over and over again, it's going to be useful to repeat exactly the measurements you find once. Tweezers are pretty useful in book restoration because when you need to take out material, perhaps board, or if you need to lift material, they're really useful. They're a multi-purpose tool that will come in handy again and again. Marisol Zuniga is demonstrating two types. One is with the curved, and the second with straight pincers. And with experience, you'll be able to develop your own style for whichever works best for you. We are going to introduce scalpels and cutting blades. She's using right now an Olfa blade, which is a brand common such as X-Acto brand and others. But it's an absolutely necessary part of your conservation lab to have a blade of some sort. You can also use surgical scalpels of different sizes. That gives you the flexibility to use different types of blades and different curved blades. And we're also demonstrating a heavier duty type X-Acto knife cutter. So depending on your needs, you're going to need a different type of blade, but you absolutely need to have a utility blade. Here, Sofia Morales is going to demonstrate the Microspatula. It's a very useful tool, but the thing is, it's not really intended for use it wasn't designed for a specific purpose. It probably was actually designed for surgeons or doctors that was co-opted for conservation work. With that said, though, it's a very, very useful tool. It'll help you lift, as she's demonstrating. It'll also help you clean out parts of cloth or board or dried adhesive, especially when you're cleaning spines. So they're cheap also, so they're great to have around. Dolores Diaz is going to demonstrate the use of some lifting knives. The first is a lifting/paring knife that is really useful when you are going to do a reback or a recase, or you want to separate board from paper or cloth, and it's pretty thick. The other ones that we'll use are actually made out of hacksaw blades that were modified using grinders, stone sharpeners, and sandpaper. And they can be used to lift board and cardstock that's pretty thin, including ones that are on including paper on the spine. And there are different types of blade shapes for those, including a circular blade, a blade with a bevel in one direction, and a blade with a bevel in another direction. Right now, Dolores is using the round blade, and that's pretty good to take off cardstock or old paper off of spines. I'll talk about the types of erasers you might need in a conservation lab. The first is actually called a soot sponge or a dirt sponge, and it's made out of vulcanized rubber. And this is used to take away light layers of dirt usually, and soot. It sucks it up and it'll get dirty very fast, so you usually buy it in pretty large bricks that you can cut into any shape or size you like, and then use at your discretion. You can also rewash them, I believe, so if you can reuse them. Next is an eraser full of bits of vinyl eraser, and this is also a light technique, or a technique that is not going to be that invasive and not going to abrade as much as it would a normal eraser. So that's a good idea if you're interested in doing, or if you will be working with some very rare materials. The next, obviously, could be the vinyl eraser, where it works just like any eraser you've ever seen before. It'll just lift off a pencil and sometimes some dirt. And other types of eraser you could use is this type of gum eraser, but this is probably less common in labs. Finally, you have cement pickup, a rubber cement pickup, or a crepe eraser, and this is used for lifting dried adhesive off a number of objects. So if you put a little pressure on it, it'll be able to lift up some dried goo left over, but be careful because it is pretty abrasive. Marisol Zuniga is going to demonstrate how to thread the needle as I talk about what types of needles and the threads you can use. With regard to needles, what's common are darner needles, size 3 and 5 I think are the most common, but if you're going to be doing a special type of sewing, sometimes they require their own type of needles. For example, Ethiopian sewings need curved needles. Different types of thread you can buy. It's usually measured with two measurements. The first measurement is the size of an individual thread, and the second measurement is the number of those individual threads that are tied up to make one entire cord. For example, common sizes are 18 and 25 and even in the 30s and more. I mean, there's quite a lot of types. You should look into getting the right size thread for your book. I'll talk about adhesives a little bit. We have some examples here, but there are many, many adhesives out there that you could use and that have been used in conservation and in bookbinding. This is an example of PVA type glue, which stands for polyvinyl acetate. It's a polymer, really. It's made by chemical companies, chemical products manufacturers, and distributed now for conservation uses. The formula for them is known, but it's very, very abstruse. It's hard to get your hands on, so it's just generally accepted as a reversible, useful glue. It's used nowadays for everything, basically, in bookbinding and for many things in conservation work too. So that's certainly going to be a necessity for a conservation lab. The next material here is double stick tape, and it's not archival, so don't consider it to be a stable material, but it is still useful in a lab, particularly for making boxes or making enclosures that won't touch the book or touch your object, because the adhesive will leach out. A lot of times these are kept in plastic bags because the glue leaches out and can pick up any of the material that's nearby. What we have here is some methylcellulose powder that you'd make into a mix of very viscous type, very moisture saturated adhesive, very soft adhesive, but it's mostly moisture. A lot of times you can mix that with PVA to give yourself a bit more working time due to the high moisture content of the glue. Other common adhesives, probably the most common would be paste, wheat starch paste. Of a high quality is probably the most recommended conservation grade and most useful conservation grade material, but if you're in a climate that perhaps has a lot of bugs, you might be advised to use something else. Other conservation grade adhesives are something like Lasco, and you could look into that, but that will be expensive too, and probably for only your highest quality work. Having a good assortment of brushes is very important for a conservation lab. You're going to need brushes for adhesives, also for dyes, and they're very important. You want to use brushes that are comfortable for you, and Sofia Morales is practicing with a thin brush for a small object that she's going to paste up and put on. But you can see in the spread that there are different types of brushes. There's some flat brushes. There are some big circular brushes, which are typically used for board or for larger objects. Also, what she's using is a roller, and these can come in many different sizes also, and will offer you good, even, smooth surface of adhesive for a large piece, for a large object. So exploring your different options for brushes is very important, and getting comfortable with them is, and knowing when to use which type of brush is a skill that takes a bit of experience. We're only using adhesive in this example, but you will need different types of brushes for dyes, because you certainly don't want to mix a dye brush which has some, let's for example say red coloring in the back in it to come onto some work. If you're planning to do basic paper repair and you have a heat set tissue or such as Filmoplast or Library of Congress lens tissue, you should invest in a tacking iron to apply heat to a small area at a time. This is one type of tacking iron, and it's got a holder here, and it has settings from low, medium, high, and it's continuous. So if you want medium high, you can easily adjust it. And again, this is used for heat set tissue. The first of the materials that I'm going to introduce is board. Board is a pretty essential part of all types of bookbinding, so you might want to have different types, different thicknesses of board. We'll start here with some thin board, which you could laminate. It's probably about 40 point stock. It's probably a little thicker, actually, maybe 60 point. But the scales range from 10 point, 20 point, 40 point, and I think 60 and 80 points as well. If you want an intermediate thickness, you can laminate or sand according to what you want. Getting a little thicker, you have binder's board or Davy board, which we have examples of here, which is thicker. This will be for covers of your book, for protecting your book while you're working in a press, and pretty useful to have around. There are also different conservation grade types of board, which can be very expensive, such as a Turno, but they work very, very well. So you should explore your options and understand that there are different types of board out there. Next in importance is paper. Having the right type of paper on hand is very important. What bookbinders and conservators do is put board to paper with adhesive generally. So what I'm introducing here is just certain types of paper. They're generally of the same weight, but it's good to have different weights on hand depending on your conservation job or what type of book you're trying to make. We also have different colors, which can be useful, especially when you're making end papers for book conservation projects, which were typically colored. So we have paper here. They usually come in large sheets or oftentimes rolls as well. So having a stock paper of maybe 70 or 80 pound fine archival quality paper is going to be necessary in your lab. If you plan to do quite a bit of restoration of books, for example, by making new covers or replacing spines, you're going to need some cloth material. So I have here a couple rolls of some purple and some blue cloth, and it's a good investment to have some on hand. There are three basic, I think, types of cloth. They're starch-backed, acrylic-backed, and chemical-backed. The chemical-backed is not really recommended now because it's been proved to be unstable, so try to find the first two. I have in front of me two different weights of long fibered paper, also known as Japanese tissue, and these are extremely useful to have in your lab for conservation jobs, particularly paper repair as well as lining your spines. So the one on my left is a thin long fibered paper, and this would probably be something appropriate. I believe it's probably a thin Kozo machine made, likely, but you'll see when I tear this how fibers can stick out. Fibers will stick out. And so that's very nice to distribute weight in your paper repair. And also, since it's so thin, it can be nearly invisible with a bit of experience. You can also tone both of these Japanese papers to any color you desire to make it more invisible. This other paper here on my right is a thicker weight paper. I don't know the exact name of it, but there's probably hundreds of styles of Japanese paper. So look into something that works for you best. It's probably a good way to start would be to get a lightweight machine-made Kozo and maybe something a bit heavier. And if you're going to do a lot of paper repair, perhaps something even lighter, maybe like lens tissue. So as you can see for the other one, this one is going to be a bit thicker, not as fibrous when I tear it. And this is going to be useful when you're going to make patches and infill losses, and also if you'd like some thicker linings. If you plan to reline spines and do some advanced book repair, you're going to reline spines and reattach texts to books, to cases. So if you're going to do that, you should get some textile lining. I have here a mesh, but you could get a cambric textile. There's other names for it too, such as crash, mull, super, and probably more also. And this is probably cheap, and it can come in rolls or sheets. So again, if you want to do advanced book repair techniques, you will need some of this. If you're going to be doing a bit of paper repair with paste, you will absolutely need blotters. Blotters are used to dry out any moisture quicker than paper. They're very thick, they're unsized, so they attract a lot of moisture. And also, it's a good working surface, nice white working surface that conservators oftentimes use. And these are very important to have on hand for a conservation lab. What I have in front of me is Mylar, and this is becoming increasingly important for conservation work. You can use it for a number of things. You can use it to make enclosures. You can use it to make pockets. You can even use it as not waste paper, but you can use it as an intermediary that can block adhesive if you want to paste out or glue out on it. It's a useful utility material to have around. And it comes in different sizes as well. You have smaller than 3 millimeter, you have 3 millimeter, you have 5 millimeter, then you have larger than 5 millimeter. I think 3 and 5 are pretty typical to have, and the others you can explore on your own and find out what works for you. This is Kraft paper, which we're using as waste paper that for basically to glue out and paste out on top of. Similar in use to what's called newsprint in the States. You can use any type of material really, but having a roll of this on hand really just makes your life a lot simpler. You can cut it into strips such as I have here, which are manageable to glue out on, and you'll see these in most every lab. I have in front of me heat set tissue, and this is a thin tissue, a thin long fiber tissue with adhesive on one side of it. The adhesive is activated with heat, hence the name heat set tissue, and it can come in various shapes and sizes. What I have in front of me is a roll, a thin roll, and this is Filmoplast R brand. Other types of tissues come in rolls or sheets and can be sold by different vendors. What I have in front of me now are wax paper and spun polyester. This is remade, but there's another brand name called Hollytex, which is also useful. Wax paper is useful when you are casing in a book to keep glue away from your text block. And Rime or Hollytex is extremely useful, not only for your basic book repair if you're going to use paste, but also anytime you use glue in repairs for books, papers, cloths, covers, anytime you don't want it to stick to something and you need to put it into a press, the spun polyester doesn't form a bond with the adhesive, so you can use that as an interleaving layer between, for example, blotter or your board or a newsprint and your object. It's useful to have some thick but not too thick type of paper. This is a 10-point board, and this is going to be useful for making enclosures, for making pockets in books, and also for protecting material in pamphlet binders. You can also use this material to make map folders for oversized material. And this size, 10-point, along with 20-point, are extremely useful to have on hand. If you'll be equipping a lab, you should get cutting mats. They are going to protect your tables anytime you do cutting. You certainly don't want to cut or use your scalpel on your table. This size is nice. It can cover a large portion of work, and also small sizes for individual cuts could be useful for you. I'm standing by a cut trimmer, which is really a paper trimmer, but it gives me the opportunity to talk about probably the most important piece of equipment if you'd like to invest in one for your shop, for bookwork especially, which is the board shear. They can be quite expensive and can be quite large also. But on the other hand, they're very, very useful for making exact cuts of an exact size and squaring up all your material. I have with me Marisol Zuniga, who's going to show how to work it. And you can see she's first going to cut a piece of thin board, very thin board, and she's using the straight edge at the bottom along with the square edge that she lined up to give a square edge and a square cut. And so thus we have a straight cut and a true straight edge, and she's going to do the same for another cut on the same board. She's also using at her foot a foot pedal, which presses down the material. And what is to her right is, and extending over the cutter, is a front gauge, which acts a lot like the square tightener along the bottom edge, but can enable you to insert things from the other edge. Now, the last point I think that we'll talk about is how the board shear works. It is really just a giant scissor. It works on the principle of cutting just as a scissor does, so they can be extremely sharp and do require upkeep to keep sharp, and is an extremely useful thing if you can afford it to have in your lab. I have with me Wendy Constancia, who's going to be demonstrating the Colibrì machine. And the way it works is very similar to another machine called the ultrasonic welder, in that it welds together with heat Mylar, and it's very useful for when you'd like to make folders, enclosures, encapsulations. And so what Wendy's doing right now is she's making a Mylar cover for a soft cover book. The first line she did, you'll see, welded this part shut. And the next one she's just using pressure, and the machine is cutting it off, will enclose the other section. And there you have it. I have with me Dolores Diaz, and we will be showing you how to use a casing press. So she's going to begin demonstrating it while I talk about it. This is a casing press made by Temper Productions, and it's actually a 2-in-1 press. It's a standing press and a lying press. We're going to use it first as a standing press, and because of its two-in-one function, it might be a good idea for small labs or labs with a limited budget. But if you can get your hands on it, a sturdier, as you can see, this is made out of wood, so if you can get your hands on it, a sturdier metal press might be in your interests to get. What you want to look for in a press is how much room you have between the screws. The wider it is, the generally better it's considered. And also how big the platen is, so how big of material you can fit deeply. So that was the standing press that she just demonstrated. Now I'm going to show you how this can convert to a lying press. I'm just going to close up the space between the screws for a bit, and then you can flip it. This just lifts out, and then you can flip it. And then we can work it just like a normal lying press. So she's got the book between boards here, and what she's going to do is put the book into the lying press and then tighten it up. Now, a lying press is really useful when you want to get at the spine of any book, and you could also, if you don't have a lying press, you could put the book between bricks or weights. But if you want to if you're going to be doing a significant amount of book work, you want to put it in the lying press, like the Blotters just showed. I have with me an example of another type of standing press. This one is extremely heavy duty and with a very wide space between the jaws, between the platens. It's made entirely out of metal. It's extremely heavy duty and would probably be useful most for batch work if you're going to have quite a few or production work. If you're going to be having quite a few number of books that need to be pressed, you could stack them all up one on top of each other in between the wide berth between the jaws. This is only one example of a standing press. There's many others. There's small nipping presses. There's copy presses that are now used for bookbinding. Many are available used secondhand or at auctions. So if you want to pick some up, keep your eyes open and talk to your colleagues, and you should be able to find some. I have with me Sofia Morales, and we will demonstrate a plow. This is a vertical plow that is, it's a lightweight plow. It's made out of wood, but it's a useful tool to have, especially if you'll be doing, for example, quite a lot of double fan adhesive bindings, in which the spine needs to get shaved off exactly even. What she's doing now is closing the bar to put some pressure on the pages that will get cut. And if you were using a hardcover book, which she's not, you'd want to make sure that you're not depressing the round. So what she's going to do is expose the blade that is going to cut a straight edge of to the paper, and after a while, the cover is going to be hard to get off. But after a few goes with the blade, you can expose more of the blade until you eventually cut through the entire thickness of what you're cutting. And you can continue this for a while, and then until you cut through.